Good morning, Mr. Thompson.
Good morning. It's nice to meet you
It's
and
nice
be
to
with
meet
you
too.
today.
Awesome. So I have a first question. Are you in the Ozark Tecmo Bowl Fantasy Football League?
I am, in fact, in the Ozark Tecmo Bowl Fantasy League.
Awesome. I happen to also be in the Ozark Tecmo Bowl Fantasy League. Let's look at the standings real quick.
Yes, let's do that.
So, 6th place in our division out of 7,
Yes,
Mr. Andy Thompson.
that's me.
What do you think causes that issue?
The cause of that issue is I had a lot of faith in the Chicago Bears and specifically Justin Fields this year.
Very valid.
And I built my team, every fantasy team that I have, around Justin Fields and the Chicago Bears. And when they absolutely came out and laid an egg, it has destroyed nearly every fantasy team of mine.
That's very valid. To be honest with you, because when I drafted, I'm in like 4 different leagues. Every time I drafted, I was like, I want Justin Fields. That was the play. It's like, I'll get him. Someone grabbed him right before me every time. Or I got really lucky. Like, there was this one league, I got Josh Allen like the 4th round. I was like, oh, okay. I dodged a huge bullet there.
You did.
And there was that one week, I can't remember week 5 or 6 in there, but he went off. And they're like, is he back? Is he back? And it's like, all right, well.
He's not back.
He is not back. But the team right now isn't half bad right now. I mean, Joe Burrow, QB, Trevor Lawrence, the backup.
I'm doing okay at quarterback. I'm doing okay at wide receiver. My other risk that I took was I played the long game with Jonathan Taylor and Jameson Williams, and only one of those two has turned out to work for me.
For sure.
So Jameson Williams has been a complete bomb. Jonathan Taylor finally came in, but it's probably too late to really save my season. So I'm going to have to, chalk it up and say the old standby of there's always next year.
100% for sure. The funniest thing that I found out was, in one of my leagues, I drafted Devin Singletary. I was like, this is his year. This is it.
Yeah.
Classic Devin Singletary, below 10 points every game, but exploded yesterday.
On my bench.
On your bench.
On
your bench. Very understandable.
Yeah.
For what it's worth, I forgot to switch my lineup the other day on one of my other leagues. One moment. It's like George Kittle on the bench.
Oh, my goodness.
It's bad. It's
That's
half
terrible.
the team.
I'm so sorry.
I'm going to barely squeak out, but it's like George Kittle, David Montgomery, Chris Olave. It's like...
Wow, that hurts. When you put that many points on your bench,
it's like we're tied at like 148, somewhere in there, like the guy I'm against. And it's like I could be beating you by like 100 points right now.
You really could be.
But yeah.
But you're going to pull it out tonight?
I hopefully will pull it out tonight. I have Javonte Williams playing, so that'll be nice at running back. But
that'll be good. He should get some points tonight.
Yeah, thank God.
Good morning, Mr. Thompson.
Good morning. How are you this morning?
I'm doing pretty good. How about you?
I'm great, thanks. Happy to be here.
So I'm going to ask you some little bit deeper questions.
Bring it
the
on.
first one, does every individual have inherent self-worth?
Yes. I think, well, let me rephrase that. I think everyone has inherent worth. Every individual has inherent worth. If we look at John Locke, he says that everyone is born with natural rights to life, liberty, and property. So you have a natural worth and value. I think it's intrinsic in every person. Now, self-worth is a different question.
Yeah.
Whether or not you see yourself as valuable, I think is something that you are born with. You can lose over time. We look at this kind of exploration of self-esteem and how people's opinion of their own value changes over time. But I think that's something that we lose as we age, or I should say some of us lose as we age, but then we get to earn back through education, through self-reflection, through looking at ways that we can serve others. So I would say that, yes, every individual has value, and one's assessment of your self-worth is individualized and can be earned through a life well lived.
What would you say some of those pressures that would make somebody lose that self-worth?
I think we all go through the process as we age of finding out that the world isn't really about us.
Yeah.
Like when you're a little kid, if you talk to someone 2, 3, 4, their entire world is themselves. And as we learn that other people have feelings and emotions, we have to kind of re-examine our own beliefs about ourselves.
Yeah.
And this is really cognitive compared to what a kid's doing. But a kid is going to figure out, hey, this world isn't really about me and what I want. And so that's a big hit to your self-esteem. Like I went from being the most important person on the planet to now having to think about all these other people. But as you grow up, you start to find the things that you're good at, the things that matter to you, and then you build that self-worth based on your belief systems, based on your family, based on your friends, based on your abilities. And then as you get older, you become a teenager, all that gets thrown back into a question again as you have to find yourself going through this kind of adolescence and changing and finding who you are as a person. And then eventually you settle in on, okay, I am this person. I know what I am. I know who I am. And I have begun to understand what my worth is. And eventually, as you get into the workforce, as you get into your adult life, you end up finding out that, hey, my worth is not necessarily relative. It is based on what my own conception of self is. And so everyone gets a different picture of what their self is. And over time, that sense of worth grows or diminishes, but I think it's always intrinsically there inside every person.
Just that collective aspect of humanity that's in everybody.
Absolutely.
But the human mind is just it's cliche, but it's
Right.
an amazing gift, and you can really build off of that.
And so
Make a beautiful
complex.
thing.
It's
Yeah.
really, really a complex system that we don't really understand yet. So this idea of self-worth is really hard to understand because we don't really understand all the structures and functions that help us determine what is us. We haven't broken open what is consciousness. We haven't broken open what is the self. We haven't even broken open whether we really make conscious choices or whether we just rationalize the choices afterwards. And so if we don't understand those fundamental structures of what it means to be a human, how can we effectively say that we understand what self-worth is? But going all the way back to the start of my answer, I really think that every single person has intrinsic value from both a personal level and if we're looking at it from a governmental perspective, the government values every individual life at $9.7 million when they're calculating the costs of potential sacrifices of a human being. So if we're looking at objective measures, and I suppose these aren't particularly objective, you could say they're subjective as well, but if we're looking at objective measures, you are at least worth $9.7 million to the U.S. government.
Yeah.
And I would say that it is likely that every person has someone who believes their worth to be infinite.
Yeah. How would you define, this is a really broad question.
Sure.
And of course, a lot of these questions aren't answered, so you could really just shoot me with theories or ideas.
Absolutely.
But how would you define consciousness or the self?
That's a great question. And there's a lot of people smarter than me trying to define consciousness and the self. I don't think that you can make a universal definition of self. I think if you're looking at the self, you could look at it through a psychological lens. You could look at it through a philosophical lens. You could look at it through a religious lens. Each of these lenses are going to have a very different approach to what is the self. Your psychological lens is going to look at it more as the self is the total construction of your social plus genetics and the way that your brain operates. Your religious construction is going to vary based on your religion, but most religions have this idea of yourself is your own morality and relationship to the founder or God figure in that religion, but it is also your relationship with the people around you and how you interact with others. And then finally, if you're looking at more of a philosophical approach to the self, it comes back to the idea of, do we even really have a self? Or are we just a collection of neurons that fire and then we go, oh, that seemed like a great thing to do, and here's why I chose to do that when you didn't really make the choice. For me, I think personally, when I talk about what is the self, I think about it as the combined experience of my entire life and my reaction and personal narrative to it. So I think that's how I would define the self, but when we're looking at it, there's really no good definition that I'm aware of. And then consciousness, who knows? We're trying to figure that out. We're getting close to cracking some aspects of consciousness. I remember reading a study about how we've learned how we can, what parts of the brain control becoming conscious versus becoming unconscious. They can kind of flip that off in monkeys now with some kind of Elon Musk. Some of his experiments are along those lines. But at the same time, we don't really know what this construction is. And I don't know that we ever will. It's one of the most interesting thresholds of our knowledge right now is what is consciousness and what is information, and how do those two things interact?
Because we're in this really weird time in history. It's kind of like we're just,
Yeah,
we're
we're
at this
right
crossroads.
right, and like AI, you know, when does an AI become conscious? Is a fantastic question
Yeah.
that I don't have the answer to, but we need to make this determination at some point in the near future. What do we accept as the minimum threshold for consciousness?
Yeah, that's a really good point. Will we ever know? Who knows?
Who knows?
Yeah. I would love to go deeper, but next question. Is the American dream alive and well today?
It is. I think the American dream is alive and well. And if we look statistically, we live at the best time in human history to be an American pursuing the American dream. Now, we need to put some guardrails around that. If you are someone who does not currently own a house, and you consider home ownership or property ownership to be an essential part of the American dream, that dream is probably a dream delayed at this point as we kind of work through some difficult economic times. If you are someone who is saying that the American dream is the ability to take who I am and maximize who I am in a safe society, then we actually live in the very best time. Like an American born today is likely going to live past 100. And actually, the average that I saw recently was an American born today is probably going to live to an average of 104 years old.
Wow.
If we're looking at every single statistic that we measure about quality of life in America today, they are all at historical highs for benefits for the people living in society. The exceptions being opioid use and suicide being the two that would be exceptions to this. But you live, and you guys as high schoolers are going to graduate into an America that is the safest, the most prosperous, the wealthiest, and arguably the most successful America that we've ever seen. It may not feel like it.
Yeah.
And if you talk to 100 Americans, 95 of them are probably going to tell you that that's not the case for them. But statistically, that is what we're seeing. So is the American dream alive? Yes, I think it is. And I think it is out there for the vast majority of people to grasp.
Based on those statistics, if you ask a lot of students my age and if you ask them the same question, it would be completely the opposite,
Right.
which I think is really interesting. What do you think is the media's role in that debate? Because I think that's like, yeah.
The media has a huge impact, and I mean that as like your traditional media and your social media. If we're going to take a look at how things are portrayed in the media is an attention business, both traditional and social. Attention business requires you to do things that will catch and hold attention, and the things that catch and hold your attention the most are things that make you sad or angry. No one wants to go out there and share a whole bunch of great stories about all the wonderful things that are happening because no one will watch it. I mean, you'll get some viewership, but for the most part, if you're out there saying that life is great, people will turn in once and get the story and be like, oh, okay. But if you are angry about something, if you are sad about something, that's something that's going to get shared across social media. That's something that's going to maintain your attention. It's going to get you to talk about it with others. And so we have this kind of innate human drive to make the worst things that happen around you the things that you know about the most. And that's just simply not representative of what's actually going on in society. And I would say for you guys, as a group of people who've grown up attached to devices, like probably most of your generation looks at the world through the lens of TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat. You are putting your knowledge of the world around you in the hands of people who are incentivized to make you as miserable as possible.
Yeah.
So it doesn't surprise me that your generation would say that. That's not to say that your generation isn't right in a lot of respects. There are a lot of things that your generation is going to inherit that is going to be a major crisis. And the media is a huge part of that, whether that's the 24-hour media where, hey, we need 24 hours of news coverage. There's not 24 hours of news, so we need to put angry people up here to get people to keep watching. Or whether it is social media that feasts on the fears and negative attention. I can't really say that the media is innocent in driving that worldview. But one of the benefits of that is your generation is one of the most socially conscious generations and actually works for change in a way that no other generation really has since about the 1960s. So you have a social consciousness that is admirable, that we don't see in older generations. You look at my generation, I'm a millennial. When my generation gets upset about something, they send a tersely worded tweet about it and leave a bad Yelp review, neither of which is anything other than virtue signaling. Nowadays, your generation is far more likely to be actively involved in making a change. And maybe the media has some responsibility for that. So that could be a positive thing that comes out of this media background.
And that ties just right into the next question, because maybe this fault is played by the media, contrary to the statistics you just said. But is the fault of society is it more of the government or the individual, or is it a mix of both?
It's always a mix of both. Like, you can't say that a government or a media or anything is solely responsible for the evils in society. Like, humans have to be responsible for their own choices. And this kind of goes against what I was saying earlier, that we may not even have the rational ability to choose what we do. There's a lot of work on there. It's like free will and illusion. I do believe in free will. I disagree with the assertion that free will is an illusion. So I feel like humans do have the ability to choose for themselves and make rational choices for themselves. So it is always a combination. Anyone who would say, hey, it's entirely your upbringing, hey, it's entirely the media consumption, hey, it's entirely social media, it's entirely X, Y, or Z, they are wrong, I think. I think it is a combination of your own choices as an individual and how you choose to interact with those structures around you. Now, that's not to say that if you live under an oppressive government that you've got it easy. We can't look at something like what's going on with Hamas in Israel and that war right now. We can't say that every civilian in either side is completely innocent in this conflict. But we also can't say that they're guilty. Like, every civilian has the ability within themselves to protest and go against their government. So there are governmental structures that make it really hard to do that. If you're in North Korea and you don't know that you have that ability and you've been intentionally taught your whole life that the government is the best thing for you, it makes it really hard to exercise that right. But it still remains with the people. And so, yeah, you can blame governments, you can blame media, you can blame schools, you can blame whatever you want. But I think the culpability on people's choices belong to both the individual and within society. And I think that we need to reconcile, how we view other people through a lens of their choices are sometimes forced, and look at something that is more based on grace and then ultimately reconciliation, as opposed to judgment and saying, hey, we have to blame people for everything that's going wrong. There's a lot of blame to go around. People deserve some of it, governments deserve some of it, corporations deserve some of it, but we have to look at it through the lens of we need to see the best in people.
I agree, 100%. And when you were talking about free will a second ago, how would you define that? What aspect of humanity or the human mind or consciousness or anything like that would allow a person to have free will? Is it just an inherent component of consciousness, you would say, or is it something you could define?
I like how you stated that as an inherent component of consciousness. I would hope that it's an inherent component of consciousness. I think as human beings are moral free agents. We are. I don't agree with Locke when he says that we're a blank slate. I think that's naive, and it's because he's from 200 or 300 years ago. We do come in with some things stacked against us. We know now that genetics play 25 to 75% of our personality and the way we do things, depending on the way you're raised. The way you're raised plays a huge component on future success. So yeah, your free will is impacted by your genetics. Your free will is impacted by how you're raised. Your free will is impacted by your education. Your free will is impacted by the information that is fed into your brain. But ultimately, I believe that humans are free moral agents who are able to make their own choices, come up with their own morality, come up with their own virtues, come up with their own sense of self-worth. And they can then choose to interact with their world as people who are fully in control of the elements that are within their control.
Yeah, that's amazing points. You have a lot of amazing points here. Going back to is the fault of society based on the government or individual? Remember to vote.
Absolutely.
When you're old enough, please remember to vote because it's all on you. We are the generation that are going to change things.
100%. Every day I talk about the importance of voting, and not just voting when it's the presidency. Get out and vote anytime that there is an election in your city, in your state, because 97% of the laws that impact you on a daily basis are created by either your city or your state. So if you just wait for the 4 years when the president's up for election, you're missing out on the major part of what affects your day-to-day life. Get out there, vote in primaries. Get out there, vote in city elections. Get out there, vote in state elections. In fact, if there's a one that's least important to go vote in, it's the presidential election because you have the least amount of say in who becomes president. You have the most amount of say about what laws get passed based on initiatives and referendums. You have the most to say on who represents your city and your state. That's where your greatest amount of power is. So you have to get out and vote in those elections.
100%. Yeah. So when you get old enough, vote.
Vote.
Be educated in your decisions. And one more thing, takeaway from everything he said. I remember him talking about the fault of the government and the individual with society. And he remembered to say, see the best in people and always keep an open mind because that's one of the important things. Because how are you supposed to learn anything new if you don't have an open mind? It's obvious, but a lot of people don't realize it. They go through their whole lives not realizing that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
See the best in people and find ways to forgive them if they do make a mistake. Reconciliation is something we've lost in society.
Yeah.
And I want to see a way for us to get it back.
100%. Do you have anything you'd want to add?
No, I'm good. Thanks,
Awesome.
man. I appreciate the questions.
For sure.
So I wanted to hop in here real quick while you guys were talking because
absolutely.
There was a point that I had that really stuck with me a couple years ago about self-worth. And I was really depressed. I had a lot of mental health issues that was going on with me. And I found it hard to find my self-worth, but I didn't know at the time because, I mean, I was still young, like I was still developing and all that. I didn't really know what self-worth was or how to find it. And so I was talking with a therapist at the time, and basically she was talking to me, and I told her about how I didn't really see why I was on this earth, and I didn't really have a feeling of, like, belonging and all that. And her point was, well, do you have self-worth issues? And from there, I wasn't for sure what she even meant by that. Right. And as she was explaining it, what she explained to me and her beliefs as to why she has self-worth was because God put her here to create and to kind of, her connections with humans was kind of how, was her reason why she was here. And the bigger, broader version is something that I really loved and is still stuck with me today, was that you create, therefore you have worth.
Right.
When I was told this, I didn't understand and thought, well, I'm not much of an artist. Like, I don't create many things. And because of that, I don't see worth in what I create, whether that be a music piece or a cover of a song or something that I draw. I mean, I could doodle right now, and that is technically something that I created.
Sure.
And her point was that creation is relative. Whether it's good or bad, it's still your creation. And therefore, because you have created something, you have worth. And that worth is inherent to only you and can't be measured by somebody else.
I think that's a great point, especially when we're looking at art or just the way that we create the relationships around us. We can put that on its head and say, like, it's not even just physical creations. It is the creations of our interactions with other people that help bring your worth. And I got to say, guys, as you're making a podcast, like, you certainly have the creation thing down. And your worth is more than just a podcast. But I love the work that you guys are doing. So really, really appreciate you.
Thank you. Something I wanted to say to people that I have found myself to help out is to create something, whether you're good or bad at it. Something, Arden totally agrees because he can't go like 2 minutes without creating something. But when you create something, it makes your brain like at peace. It's like there's less stress, and it also gives you confidence because you have created something, and that also helps you out. It gives you motivation. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah,
Talk about all the stuff you create.
Back on creation, I think that's really interesting because I play piano, guitar, and I'm also an artist. And congratulations, Ozark. We just did really good at the Jury Best of the Midwest show.
Nice job.
And
Arden for winning.
Hey, good job, Arden.
Thank you.
Way to go.
But even though I'm not necessarily sure how to define what makes that creation so meaningful, but I genuinely think throughout my life I've realized that one of the most important things is to genuinely just spread love, like a big, heavy emphasis on love and just positivity in general. And because love makes the world go round.
Yeah, it does.
And everybody needs to know that because it's a beautiful thing. And a lot of people don't really realize it. They know about it, but they don't realize it. And I think that's really important, and people need to know that. So if you take anything away from this, remember to love unconditionally.
Absolutely. And love what you make.
And love what you make. And another really good question that stems from that I still don't fully understand because I'm trying to figure stuff out as well. What is the... I'm trying to figure out how I would define this. What do you think is the nature of love and attachment, and where do you think is a fine line between that? Because you could argue and say that love is attachment, but how would you define the separation from it? Because I resonate a lot when you look at attachment as being something unhealthy, and you separate the two and have love, but can you necessarily have the two together and still...
Yeah, okay. Love and attachment. And I am by no means an expert on this.
Yeah, me neither.
So I would say that I am also always looking for, the confluence of those things. I will say, as someone who, tries to experience these things, I would say that love and attachment can definitely go hand in hand. Love and attachment can also be destructive. Mm-hmm. It really depends on whether your love is serving yourself or whether it is serving the people that you love. And what I mean by that is a healthy love for another person, healthy attachment to another person, where your love is bidirectional, where it's reciprocated, where it is respectful of what the other person wants, where it is within healthy boundaries set by both people in the relationship. Attachment being within the confines of what is acceptable to everyone involved. I think that those are pictures of health. And one thing that I would say, a therapist that I once talked to said that healthy love is a willingness to accept influence from someone else. Mm-hmm. And so if you are loving someone, if you're loving something, if you're attached to someone or something, accepting influence from that person and having that change you, whether it's a person, whether it's an object, whether it's a skill or a hobby or music or art, allowing an experience to change your idea of self in a healthy way is what is healthy love and attachment to me.
Yeah, I completely resonate with that. I think that's like when you really think into what is love, because that's one of the most hardest things to define.
Absolutely.
And whether that's like with a relationship or a love of certain things in life, that's something really tricky when you start to look into it, when you start to look at the nature of those two things. Yeah.
It's one of those things that, again, you're asking really great questions that we don't have a lot of great definitions
like,
for.
If you ask me a lot of these questions, I can give you a lot of theories and different ideas, but I wouldn't be able to give you a concrete answer. I'm not sure if anybody would be able to.
No, everyone's just got a theory on it.
Yeah. And also, if you are intrigued by any of these questions and you want to come in the hallway and ask me something cool, I'm all game for that. So come and ask me anything.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
I look forward to hearing more of your wisdom.
For sure. And in the next clip we got, you have anything you want to add on?
No, I'm good.
And the next clip we got coming on is going to be awesome, so stay in tuned.
So Arden brought up a good point about love and attachment earlier, and it made me think about one of the modern thinkers. His name is 21 Savage. Are you familiar with 21 Savage?
I'm not. I mean, I've heard the name, but I couldn't tell you anything about them.
So 21 Savage is a British rapper, and one of his most popular songs off his most popular album is called Ball Without You, where he talks about a breakup. One of his infamous lines that he says is, and I'll quote, "I'd rather have loyalty than love, 'cause love really don't mean jack. Straight up. See, love is just a feeling. You can love somebody and still stab them in their back. On God. It don't take much to love. You can love somebody just by being attached. 21. See, loyalty is an action. You can love or hate me and still have my back. Facts."
Sounds like someone who has experienced some loss in relation to relationships. And I would say that when we're talking about love, I think that he's right. Like, you can love someone and be disloyal to them. We see stories of that all the time. But I would suggest that true love, committed love, we're between equal partners in a relationship, comes with that expectation of loyalty. It comes with that, checking in with one another to make sure that the relationship is sound and what both partners are needing. So I would respectfully disagree that it's love or loyalty. I think it is both, and it is being in an equal partnership with someone based on communication and consent between the parties.
So true love includes loyalty in there?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think you can love someone and be disloyal. I agree with that point. But I think that true committed love includes loyalty.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So Arden was talking about attachment, and we've talked about this in the past, and something I brought up to him that I wanted to see how you felt about was he said that he debated the fact that there could be attachment with no love, or at least was thinking about the idea of it and if it's possible. And I told him that there could be good attachment and bad attachment in love, that there are some boundaries that you have to make in order to do that. And I feel that social media can also drive unhealthy attachment issues in a relationship. Would you agree with that?
Oh, I absolutely agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
When we're looking at how social media pervades your life, like, it's likely that for most people in your age group, social media is one of the last things you look at before you go to bed and one of the first things that you look at when you wake up. It's likely that your longest continual relationship thus far in your life has been with your social media platform. And yeah, you probably love it, but you don't love it in a way that is loyal and committed. You love it in a way that it makes your brain feel good when you get a dopamine hit. That kind of attachment, I would say, is unhealthy. And you can look at this through any kind of addictive thing. And love is a little bit addictive. Like, we definitely do get used to the idea of love. And we get used to the target of our love. But I think when we're dealing with attachment, attachment has to be based on mutual respect for it to be healthy. And so I would suggest that social media attachment is not based on that, and so is at its core unhealthy, which is hard to say because it's the main medium that all of us, including myself, I use a lot of social media, use to communicate with others. There's this term called parasocial relationships, and I don't know exactly how I feel about it. I have seen people who've successfully created parasocial relationships in a healthy way that leads to a community of mutual support. And I've seen a lot of people who will tell you that their attachment to parasocial relationships and social media in general has led them to feel isolated, lonely, and unable to interact with their peers in person. And that just strikes me as sad and manipulative on the part of the social media platforms.
Yeah, and I actually know a decent bit about parasocial relationships. I actually like to study them and stuff like that. I really like the idea and the concept of parasocial relationships, and seeing as the technology advances, being able to see parasocial relationships and learn more about them as we are going on. And I think that I don't know. So I believe that parasocial relationships we can see since television. Sure. I think that it hasn't been looked at. It's looked at a lot differently now than it used to be. But I mean, you had insanely loyal, committed fans to this guy right here. This guy, they loved Elvis.
Absolutely.
And
Love Elvis.
yeah, we
Who
love
doesn't
Elvis.
love Elvis? Come on now.
I mean, so Elvis was just everyone loved Elvis, and I mean that's a parasocial relationship. And you see, I mean, every time you see an actor or an actress say, "Oh, I love all my fans," that's a parasocial relationship in action. I mean, you don't know the person, but yet you're spending so much time, and I'm guilty of this.
Oh, we all are.
My favorite artists, I'm researching all the time. When is their next drop? What's their unreleased music?
Right.
What are they doing right now? What relationship are they in? I mean, we care so much about these people we don't even know and who they're dating, and it's crazy that it's been propped up in order for the social media, the actors, the producers, their labels are propping it up just to get more money.
Right.
Which is
absolutely.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you want more money?
Of course.
And yeah, you're right. This is not a modern phenomenon. You could trace this back throughout all of history. There's stories of Roman gladiators who had super fans who followed them around. It's just now become so much more easy to have parasocial relationships, even amongst the people that you see every day.
Yeah.
Because social media is a curated presence that you can be a fan of this person's social media and be sitting next to them in class and never say one word to them.
Yeah.
And so I think we're approaching, it's such an interesting field of study right now, and I'm glad you've looked into it. And I would ask you, is this something that you see, that you follow someone on TikTok or Snapchat, but if you're in person, you've got nothing to say to them?
Well, partially I would be just being somebody who uses the internet, obviously there's content creators that I love. And through the years, I mean, there's so many different takes on, should you go up to a content creator that you don't even know, say you love their stuff, ask for a photo, or should you leave them alone because they're just another human being? I believe that I would want to come up and approach them and say, hey, I love what you do. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But when it comes to my almost nerves in the moment towards a random person that I've never met, as well as feeling like I would be bothering them, then probably not.
Right, because you're risking rejection
Yeah.
from someone who you care about, and you're risking putting someone that you care about in an awkward position.
Yeah, for sure.
And there are some media personalities who will tell you, hey, come up, ask, and if I say no, just understand that, I don't want that at that time. That it's nothing on you. It's just I need my own space. There are some content creators who routinely say, hey, if you come up and tell me how much you appreciate what I'm doing, I'm happy. You just made my day. Mm-hmm. All right. And there's some who are like, hey, I'm happy to say hi, but I don't want to sign or take pictures. And we just have to be accepting of these boundaries that people place amongst themselves.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, I mean, you even see it in places where there's no motive. Well, I mean, there is a motive, which is money, but they are not directly even tied to the people or the actors. I'm going to call him out, Matthew, right now. Matthew posted on his story like a couple hours ago, Ryan Gosling's birthday, which I then saw the post that because he put it, and I said, hey, that's awesome because it's Ryan Gosling's birthday. Who doesn't love Ryan Gosling?
Yeah, he's the best.
But the person who posted it,
Leonardo DiCaprio was like 4 days ago.
what?
It was Leonardo DiCaprio's 4 days ago.
Yeah, Leonardo
Love you, Ryan.
DiCaprio.
And Leo.
Yeah, we love them. But I mean, he posted that yesterday, I think, because I think his birthday was yesterday. And I mean, I saw it. I said, "Oh, this is awesome." But while we were talking, it made me think the person who even posted that wasn't even directly correlated at all to him. Was just knows that he could get money
Right.
from the people who love Ryan Gosling,
Right.
which
And
is kind of cool.
We see the same thing with Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift. Also, by the way, Ryan, if you're watching, happy birthday. Great job. I appreciate your career. And Leo last week, same to you.
I love La La
Yeah.
Land,
Yeah, it's been great.
We love it.
I appreciate your work. But
and you're a master on the keys.
yeah. But that's the thing is there's so much money to be had through, and that's kind of the, parasite part of the parasocial relationship is like, there's people who are just in it to extract value out of it. I was watching a video from Mark Cuban recently, and he was saying that one of the things that he's hoping in the future is for tickets and things like related to artists and professional athletes and things like that would all be done through NFTs. Because that way, all these people who are trying to extract value out of the image of someone like Ryan Gosling by making a happy birthday post, they would have to tie it into Ryan Gosling's NFT so that all of the revenue generated from that post would pay Ryan a little bit too.
Gotcha.
So Cuban was saying that this is a way that we can kind of make this social media experience more fair for everyone because everyone who's attached to this, even if they are profiting off someone who has not issued their consent on like, hey, I want this birthday post, it at least gives them a little bit of kickback on that. And I thought that was a really interesting way to handle kind of some of the things you're talking about.
So if we're talking about that, I find it interesting because it would completely change the dynamic of reporting.
Absolutely.
Completely. That's also would, and we've seen this start to happen throughout the years of more social media interaction and stuff like that. But it makes the person themselves the brand instead of a certain thing.
Right.
The person is the brand. Their personality, the music they make, whatever they create
Sure.
is the brand instead of,
Right. And you could argue whether or not that's a good thing. I tend to err to the side of I want the people who are creating the thing to get the biggest reward out of it.
Yeah.
I mean, all due respect to WB and Netflix and all of these, and then all the record producers and all those things, like they are an essential part of this. But I want the biggest cut to go to the people who are creating the thing.
Yeah.
And so I kind of like that idea to give them, and there's going to be people who disagree because they're like, oh, well, that's just more money to these people who are already rich. But outside of your megastars, there's a lot of people who do a lot of good work in the music industry, in the film industry, in the television industry, who aren't superstars, who that, kind of residual could do a lot to help them actually make ends meet. So I'm a big fan of that.
Yeah. Something that I would say that I think would be cool about that, or would be kind of something that we see on the live streaming platform Twitch, and that is that if you have like over 1,000 viewers, I believe it is, you're in the top 1%.
Yeah.
It's over like 10 viewers.
Yeah, over
Right.
10 viewers, and
Yeah.
you're in the top 1%. Because people find creators and then they stick with them.
Absolutely.
So those people who get
Stream on Twitch.
yeah.
It's a click of a button, any device.
Yeah. So, the moment you get over 10 viewers, and you could be making like a little bit of money, but those
Right.
people who have 100 viewers can then reinvest money into their thing and they're creating, and then we get more ideas and more streaming from
Absolutely.
there, which is super cool. I like that idea. I would say that with that, I would be worried that we'd have another like music label kind of incident where we have people controlling the NFTs and distributing them in order for the creator to not have to worry about it, kind of like a record label for like a
that's
music
always a
producer.
risk. Absolutely. There's always a risk that when you operate a system that is beyond your immediate control, which NFTs require a whole lot of technological expertise and a whole lot of computing expertise. And yes, these are structures beyond your control. It does make it hard to make sure that everything is going to the appropriate place. The benefit is that theoretically you should have a constant record of where everything is going. So you wouldn't have the opportunity where a music company could hide where some of the money is going, because it's all a public record that everyone looks at all
Because
the
it's
time.
an NFT?
Because it's an NFT.
Would that mean that it would be on the blockchain then?
Yes.
And
So
yeah.
because the blockchain is confirmed by every computer on that blockchain, and because the record of everything, every single transaction is confirmed across the entire blockchain, you theoretically have the opportunity to make sure that everyone is getting what they deserve based on their agreements. Now, with all that said, there's always ways to get around whatever protections you put in place. The people who are trying to break the rules are always a step ahead of those that are trying to enforce the rules. But I think it's at least an idea to explore, to try to make sure we're maximizing what gets back to the content creator, whether they're the kids streaming on Twitch with a single viewer or whether they are Taylor Swift leading the world in Instagram followers.
For anybody watching, I know that there's a lot of debate on NFTs and whether they are worth, and I don't know how I feel about them too. But our view of NFTs is kind of just like the Bored Ape Yacht Club and kind of money laundering. But I believe that if we could, Mark Cuban wants NFTs to be the thing that gives the premiums to the creators, but this could go for anything really. I mean, as long as the money's getting to the creator, it doesn't have to be an NFT per se. It could be, I don't know, something to do with Bitcoin instead, something still on the blockchain.
It could
even.
be any, like there's any way that you can figure out how to do this. I'm not necessarily endorsing NFTs because I'm not entirely sold on them as a object either. It was just an interesting way to think about how do you maximize moving that value back towards the creator of the content.
So we were talking about actors, and it kind of goes into my next point, which is about the strikes going on. So the writer's strike ended about a month ago, I believe.
Right.
And SAG-AFTRA, Screen Actors Guild,
Just ended their strike last week.
yeah. So the actors are off strike, the writers are off strike now, and they got a ton of benefits from their tentative agreements. The WGA had a lot of great stuff happen, but one of the things that the producers said originally was that their demands were unmeetable. If they did that, they'd go bankrupt. And yet, here we are with a tentative agreement. And do you want to talk about some of that stuff?
I can talk a little bit about it. I'm not an expert on Hollywood, but I have been kind of following along a little bit with it. From what I understand from people who I know in the industry, they feel like they have not been getting paid enough for the work that they're doing. And they have been feeling like they're at extreme risk from AI in the future. And so they were seeking protections against movie studios using AI to replace workers, human workers. And they were seeking a larger share of residuals and revenue, particularly from streaming platforms. And so I'm glad they were able to work it out. I've missed having new content come out. I'm in favor of content creators, including actors and writers, getting the best deal that they can and having some job security. But I'm sensitive to the studios as well. We live in a changing and dynamic streaming and movie scene where profit is not nearly as predictable as it used to be, where in post-COVID, you don't know exactly how people are going to interact with any single piece of content. Take Barbenheimer this summer. If you had whiteboarded that out back in January and said, hey, this is going to be the biggest enduring hit of this year, everyone was going to kind of be like, that doesn't make sense. Why would an 80s toy and a 40s nuclear weapon movie do great together? So you don't know for sure what's going to hit. And movie audiences have changed. Like, there's not as many people going to see movies. There's more people who are waiting for things on streaming. And so it's a dynamic landscape right now to try to make money. And I'm sensitive that both sides here need to make money. Like, the studios do need to make money in order to continue creating this art, but the actors and writers also need to make money in order to survive. So, yeah, I'm sensitive to both sides. I'm just glad they got it worked out.
Yeah.
That's really where I'm at, because I'm tired of reality TV. I'm glad. I mean, I like seeing more sporting events, but yeah, I'm ready for shows to come back.
Yeah, and I think that the strike. Okay, I'm gonna say this part first because it's completely unrelated, and then we can keep it going. So, like you said earlier, nobody could have predicted Barbenheimer, and nobody could have predicted the Gentle Minions last year either.
Right.
It was just kind of something that happened
Sure.
over time, and nobody had any idea it was going to happen. And there was actually, most people don't know about this, but there was a rising meme going on that got snuffed pretty quick. But the Eras Tour and a horror movie actually had a meme going on between the two of them where they were going to be a double feature.
Interesting.
And the producers at the time didn't realize that this would be good and decided to change the time of when I think it was the horror movie was released to a week later. So then
Gotcha.
people could not watch both of them because they didn't want some of the money going to a different producer
Right.
than another.
Right.
Which is really interesting to me because it's kind of hard sometimes for executives to know the way that social media works and can never really predict it.
Well, most of them are not, experts in that. Most of them are experts in making movies, and a lot of them are older.
Yeah.
And so they don't really know how to capitalize on this. They rely on marketing, but marketing isn't always sure that they're going to have a viral hit either. It would have been interesting to see the horror movie and Eras Tour mashup. That could be a lot of fun. I'm
Yeah.
sorry that we missed out on that.
Yeah. Anyways, so you were talking about how you were excited for movies to come out. And I thought, so you were saying that you were excited for more stuff to come out. And I believe that because of the writer's strike, there are writers that have more incentive to spend more time on the movies and TV shows that they're working on now that they know that they're going to be getting paid the amount that they should be, or more than before.
Sure.
So with that, I believe that what we have is going to be better in the future because of it. I mean, you see stories like Community, one of my favorite sitcom ever. Community's last couple seasons was a writers as well as an actors issues with the actors and the writers involved.
Right.
And that's the reason why the last seasons are iffy.
Yes.
Iffy.
Right.
As well as Westworld. I've never seen Westworld, but there was writer complications that led to a bad ending.
Absolutely.
And everyone's favorite to talk about, Game of Thrones.
Right.
Game of Thrones was because of a writer's issue.
Absolutely.
So the writers have a lot more say and a lot more to do with the show than you really ever give them credit for.
Oh, absolutely. I love the writers of all the shows. I will pick shows based on the writers more than the actors.
Yeah.
So I'm really glad to see them get a little larger slice of the pie. And you're absolutely right. If you look at the history of a lot of the different shows that have done well, the last writer's strike killed off a whole bunch of great shows. And then if you look at this current writer's strike, yeah, there's been a bunch that have been killed off. And yeah, when you lose your writers, it is a huge detriment to you. When we're looking at this, I'm glad the writers are back. I'm glad we're getting new things. I hope they are given more time and space to really explore these themes because, yeah, media needs good writers. Our movies need good writers. Our TV shows need good writers because, yeah, actors are also fantastic, but they're reading the words that someone else has written. And so it's that marriage of the form of acting with the function of the words that I think really brings to life the art that we get to see.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Some of the things coming out now that the strike is over is I know that Wes Anderson is working on a new movie with Michael Cera in it. Michael
Love
Cera,
Michael Cera.
love Michael Cera, one of my favorite actors. Scott Pilgrim anime coming out on Netflix.
Great movie,
The
great
tw-
book
I
series.
think the 17th.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's coming out soon. Office remake.
I don't know how I feel about that.
I don't know how I feel about it either, but for Office heads out there, there
Yes,
you go.
I mean, try it.
Community movie coming out.
That should be exciting.
I'm excited for that. Six
That's
seasons of
really,
the movie.
really exciting.
But yeah, so there's a lot of good stuff coming out now that the writer strike is done. And what do you know about the actor strike as a whole? Like the ending of it, do you know why it took longer than the WGA to reach an agreement?
From what I understand, and again, I'm not an expert in this, what I was looking at was one of the hardest things to work through was digital recreation of background actors. Because our AI is getting to be so good nowadays, you can just cut an extra out of an existing piece and just superimpose them as a background actor in other pieces. And there are some cases of people who had that happen to them where they weren't getting paid for it. They were granted in this new deal some protections that before their likeness is used or before any of their performances are used, the studios have to come and get their permission, number one, and two, pay them for that. And so any digital work, from what I understand, that recreates an existing actor, the actor gets to have final say on whether or not they're used. They do get paid. The time that it takes to digitally create them has to be paid time for them as actors, which I think is a neat development. And if you're going to be used after your death or after you stopped acting, your estate or designated representative has to give permission, and those people have to be paid on your behalf. So for movie studios, you have just cut off a huge way of getting free labor. But at the same time, those actors do deserve to have their work recognized and paid. No one should be made a digital slave to the machine.
Yeah, for sure. That's super cool. So another thing that I don't think that we've talked about yet is that because of the rise of streaming services and just the love of them compared to traditional media, we've seen writers and actors not get paid as much for the things that they create. And one of the things that the WGA created was I believe it's about 90% of their viewers are watching a certain show within the first 2 months, then they get a cut of the money made from it, basically because they have a hit.
Right. And so I think a similar thing happened with the actors, that they've set up a streaming fund that the large streaming companies have to pay into, where it is awarded out based on the success of a show. Now, one of the questions is going to be, how do you ensure transparency in that? Because, when Netflix says that they have 125 million people watching something, but you can't see their books, I don't know how that is resolved in this particular agreement. And the other thing is, I believe this agreement's only for 3 years. So it's great that they're back to work, but we might be back talking about these things in 3 years from now.
For sure. And something I was listening to about the writer's strike itself was that these were things that the producer said that there was no way that they were going to agree with. Mm-hmm. But because they've reached this agreement so far, this is just a push in the right direction. So a lot of things with AI and different things like that, they're still going to push for in the future, but this is just one little step to get them to agree before they
Absolutely. And it's always a negotiation.
Yeah.
I mean, everything is a negotiation. The businesses have the incentive to make sure that they are as profitable as possible. They have their own interests. They have their own stakeholders. They have to pay out to their stockholders. So they have an obligation to people to be as profitable as possible. And of course, the actors and the actors union and the writers union, they have an obligation to make sure that their members are as profitable as possible.
Yeah.
So you're always in this conversation between these two groups of what is the best possible revenue share between these groups to maximize what everyone can make. And it's hard to find, and it's a constant negotiation, even when it's not actively because, hey, this deal's running out. There's always negotiations behind the scenes as well.
Yeah. So I think that a very broad question to ask you is, do you believe that the making of the product and like the people involved in it should be the main, or should be a priority before talking about the profit of it? So, like, for example, the Writers and Actors Guild felt as though they were not getting paid enough, and their work was not, like, they weren't getting enough for the work that they were creating. Do you believe that the profit made off of that show should have been, I don't know how to explain it.
I think profit drives industries.
Yeah.
Like you do need to profit, and should that revenue, like there's a difference between revenue and profit.
Yeah.
So if you're talking about revenue sharing, where we just split up the money that comes in, I think that's where it should be. We should be splitting up revenue between the studio and the actors and writers. If you're talking about profit sharing, where you pay your expenses first and then you pay out of the profits, I don't think that that's the way it should
Yeah,
go.
I totally agree. I think that if you are making a product that makes it unlivable for the people creating it, then that product is not a good one.
Right.
Overall, that's what I was trying to say.
Right.
Yeah. So a lot of times people say, well, where's the money going to go for Netflix then? Mm-hmm. Well, Netflix needs a better business model then,
Right.
because they're not being kind to the people they're working with. They're putting them in unlivable situations.
Absolutely. Part of the risk falls on the person who's making the product.
Yeah.
The studio is the one who assumes the risk. Now, because they're assuming the risk, should they get more of the reward? Probably, which is why you share revenue instead of just profit, because the profit in the larger share should go to the studios because they're the ones who took the risk.
Uh-huh.
So when we're talking about residuals, yes, actors should still be paid residuals from future profits, but the majority of that, I think, should go back to the studio. They're the one who took the risk. They're the one who fronted the money. And yes, the actors should still get paid every time a sale of their acting is transacted. But the majority of that should go to the studios because they're the ones who fronted the money. Now, the caveat to that is if your studio bombs something, you don't get to take that money out of the actors and writers.
Yeah.
Like, that was the risk you took.
Uh-huh.
You need to be accountable to your shareholders. That comes out of your profits. So that is kind of where I'm at on this, is we need to make sure that if you're taking the risk, you're the one who's absorbing the risk. Mm-hmm. And yeah, you get a greater share of the profit for it. But the fact of the matter is you can't come back to the writers later and say, hey, you've messed this up, and so we are not going to pay you. That's not how that works. And I do like that if there is a hit, there is an opportunity for the writers and actors to gain more out of that. But I think that there's probably another point along the line that those residuals are probably going to filter out a little bit too. Like there needs to be an agreement. There needs to be some sacrifice on both sides. And that's what I think they've come to with this most recent deal.
So yeah, I kind of want to broaden this out a little bit. So we have seen a rise in unionizing and strikes.
Right.
A lot this year as well as last year. There's just a rise in it. And a lot of people have attributed that to, I would say, just a rise in like consciousness, like social consciousness, like you were talking about earlier with Arden. And I was wondering how you feel about unions. Do you believe that there is like a negative stigmatism on them?
There is. Now, I'll say up front, I am a union member. I'm part of a teacher union. But I have seen the benefits and the drawbacks to unions. Is there a stigma attached to unions? Yes. We live in a right to work state that has worked really, really hard to make it difficult for unions to gain traction. And I think they have some valid thoughts on this. And here's the thing. Unions are great in the respect that they protect the people who are in that union. That's their primary job, is workers coming together to protect the collective rights of the people within the union. However, there are also things that unions can do that have a much more negative impact on society at large. Unions, by their nature, have to protect the worst members of their unions just as much as they protect the best members of their unions. And so there is the subsidizing of bad behavior, there's the subsidizing of bad performance that wouldn't otherwise be allowed in a profit-driven environment. And so that's a known problem. Also, if you allow your unions to have a greater political presence and a greater social presence, they can start leveraging their power and their resources in a way that I think is unhealthy for society. I remember going to a conference up in Chicago where unions are way stronger than they are here in Missouri. And I watched someone who was at a conference walk over and plug in a plug for their booth because someone had kicked it out of the socket. And a union member came running over, screaming, cursing them out because you're taking a union job. That has to be a union electrician who does that. And he's like, I just plugged in a plug so that my stuff would work.
Yeah.
And so, like, that kind of shows you the abuse of it. Mm-hmm. If you allow unions to go completely unchecked, that they can become abusive to the profits and the success of business. So, yeah, there's a stigma on unions. Are all unions good? No. Are all unions bad? No. This is a complex thing, and it goes back to we have to have these conversations between the producers and the businesses that are taking on risk and creating profit and then passing that profit mostly off to shareholders and those people who are actually producing the things that are being marketed. It's a constant negotiation. I see unions as a positive, obviously, because I've joined one.
Yeah.
But I also see the dangers of unions, and I've worked with a lot of people over the years who have had negative union experiences. I think it's simplistic to say that a union is wholly good or wholly bad. Mm-hmm. A union is what it is able to negotiate, and if they're able to negotiate abuses, then it is bad.
So it is always checks and balances.
It's always checks and
It's
balances.
always-
I'm a
okay,
government
yeah,
teacher. It
yeah.
always comes back to checks and
Checks
balances.
and balances, yeah, for sure. A couple of things, because I also believe that there's definitely a stigma on unionizing. My personal belief is that at this time, for the individual, unionizing is something that will immediately you can like see benefits from.
Sure.
There is statistics that show that people are actually, a lot of the things that people say is that unions are people who are lazy and just want more money to do less. But you actually see a rise in production percentages
Sure.
from people who are in unions. Unions are the reason why we have the 5-day work week.
Right.
And we have a max 40 hours per week.
Correct.
Unless we get overtime pay for it. They're the reason that we have weekends and we don't have child labor anymore.
Right.
And I believe that it can help us as workers see like almost stick it to the man or something, like, because we have lots of corporations that people we don't even know
Right.
who are controlling the work that we do, and something like a union can help us with that.
Absolutely.
I would say at
Yes,
this time.
there are benefits.
Oh wow, it's
We're
it's
running out of
tempting.
time.
Yeah.
So, yes, there are benefits to unionizing. There are drawbacks to unionizing. We have to be aware of both and not reduce it to just this is good or this is bad.
Yeah.
There is a middle ground that is never popular in politics, but there is a middle ground in which unions can be constrained from overt political activity, overt disruptive activity, and also the people who are creating the businesses can be constrained to make sure that their workers are protected and as profitable as possible. It's finding that middle ground in each industry.
Gotcha. Well, thank you so much for talking with us
Thanks
today.
for
We
having
had a
me.
great time.
I've enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Of course.